Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Ambassadors. I'm Jessica here, and I'm joined by Owen Namo. Honestly, Owen, today's episode has a bit of everything: geopolitics, economic grind, and even sport and culture. It feels like we're watching a very intricate game of international musical chairs lately.
Yes, Jessica. This reshuffle almost reminds me of those long evenings when we played drafts in the township, except the stakes are much, much higher for everyone involved.
So what's on the table today is Zimbabwe's fresh diplomatic appointments to some of the world's hotspots: Cuba, the United States, South Africa, and the United Arab Emirates.
President Mnangagwa has made these selections at quite a pivotal moment. Exactly, and look, every one of those postings comes loaded. Let's start in the UAE. The outgoing ambassador spoke quite bluntly about the focus for his posting: the economy. He repeated it, 3-4 times? It is the economy, and the economy.
It's about bringing in business, boosting trade, and making sure politics serve economic interests, not the other way around. Did that sort of directness surprise you, Owen? Or is that par for the course back home?
For Zimbabwean diplomats, Jessica, that sort of candor is not too unusual these days. Though I must say, the intensity did catch my ear. There's a real urgency now to anchor our foreign policy with economic returns. It speaks to Zimbabwe's desire to court investment and find new trade partners, particularly with economies like the UAE, where opportunities in finance and commerce are enormous. There was a time, when symbolism and politics held sway, but these times they call for action, not just words. Oh, totally. And it ties right in with all the buzz on vaccine manufacturing, especially with Cuba. There was a lot in that outgoing ambassador's remarks about agreements signed for vaccine production, not just for people, but animals too. But so far, he said, it's mostly been, paperwork. He's heading to Cuba to try and turn all that into real-world benefits, both for Zimbabwe and for Cuba, especially since Cuba's been dealing with those intense sanctions from the US for decades now.
Did you get a sense, Owen, that there's an urgency about converting these old friendships into more tangible economic wins?
Absolutely, Jessica, you've hit the nail on the head. Cuba and Zimbabwe's relationship goes all the way back to the liberation struggle. So there's deep political and brotherly camaraderie. But as the ambassador himself said, politics is solid. It's the economy that needs work. There are signed deals for cooperation in health, agriculture, and even sports. But the challenge now is making those agreements more than ink on paper. Bringing home vaccine manufacturing, for example, would be groundbreaking. And don't forget, Cuba excels in sports, especially boxing and athletics, so there's hope Zimbabweans might train at Cuban academies. It could make a real difference in nurturing talent back home, if these projects actually move from talk to action,
Yeah, and he even mentioned broadening cooperation in agriculture. I always sort of think of Cuba as tough, scrappy, when it comes to making the most of a tricky climate, which probably appeals to Zimbabwe, given its own agricultural ups and downs. And then there's the idea that cultural and sporting exchanges can be just as powerful for countries as, say, trade in minerals or tobacco leaves. I wonder if we'll see real initiatives or whether it'll stay in the good intentions folder, as happens, unfortunately, a lot.
That's always the golden question: how to shift from friendly words into action. Reminds me of the agreements Zimbabwe just signed with Angola. 11 legal deals in everything from sports to higher education, even aquaculture. Plenty of ambition, but as we heard from both the Angolan and Zimbabwean ministers, the next challenge is making sure those agreements are implemented, not left to gather dust. I find the reference to a permanent follow-up mechanism, as Angola's minister phrased it, telling. We'll see if these efforts inspire a similar hands-on approach with Cuba too. And then, swinging over to the Americas, Zimbabwe is sending David Douglas Hamadziripi off to Washington as ambassador to the United States.
I'm gonna be honest, Owen. US-Zimbabwe relations have been rocky, like lost in the bush without a compass, kind of rocky. Yet Hamadziripi spoke about wanting beneficial and respectful relations, hoping for mutual gains.
What do you reckon his chances are, with all that history between them, especially after Zimbabwe's years of isolation? Diplomacy, Jessica, is the art of optimism and sometimes patience when the path is long and overgrown. Hamadziripi's goal is clearly ambitious, seeking to thaw relations that have been frosty due to issues like sanctions and long-standing political disagreements. He does have the president's confidence and support, which counts for a lot at home. The challenge, as ever, is overcoming those deep-seated challenges. Economic reform at home, trust building abroad, and perhaps finding those small wins to lay a foundation for something bigger. The US is a powerhouse, but also Zimbabwe needs meaningful economic partnerships to recover and grow.
Yeah, and it's not just Uncle Sam. South Africa is also getting a new ambassador, Lovemore Mazimo, who described the country as, well, absolutely pivotal. Neighbors don't get to choose each other, right?
And with all that cross-border trade, tourism, Zimbabwean diaspora, and remittance flows, I guess it's almost like keeping a family reunion running smoothly 24/7. Mazemo talked earnestly about building on the legacy of his predecessors and deepening those economic and political ties. It sounds lovely in theory, but I imagine it's like balancing on a log in a river. Every move counts. That's a wonderful image, Jessica. South Africa is Zimbabwe's largest trade partner, a source of critical investment, and a hub for Zimbabwean exports and migration.
The economic ties are crucial, but so are the diplomatic and personal links, which run deep. I must add, the mention of continuing to bring in investors and ensuring a good share of the South African market for Zimbabwean exports is a tall order.
But as Mazemo put it, he's looking to deepen what's already an indispensable relationship. Perhaps with enough patience, he'll help navigate those tricky waters and keep the log steady.
It all comes down to turning intention into action, paper into practice, doesn't it, Owen? It's like, no matter if we're talking vaccines, agriculture, or international trade, the roadmap is only as good as the boots walking it. Well, not to make this a total bushwalk analogy fest, but we'll be following these new ambassadors' progress closely. And I suspect there'll be both detours and surprising trails ahead. Thanks for joining me, Owen, and for your always beautiful metaphors.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks to everyone tuning in. We will be watching keenly. May these diplomats' journeys bear fruit not only for Zimbabwe, but for all their new allies across the globe. Take care, my friend.
Catch you all next time. And Owen, I owe you a cold drink the next time you make your way through Melbourne. Bye for now, folks. Farewell. Stay curious, everyone.